Today I have a bit different kind of video for you, but I don't think it's going to be so outside my normal realm that if you're a regular viewer of this channel, I don't think this will disappoint. Now, I have a movie review for you. Last night I saw Bill and Ted Face the Music.
No way!
And now, the quick answer, what did I think? Well, I have to say it was way better than I expected it to be. But you should know my expectations. I thought this was going to be possibly the worst movie ever made. I saw some of the pictures coming out and I thought it looked very cheap in the photos. Then the commercials came out and I thought it looked extremely cheap, especially with the graphics they used and some of the costuming choices. Ted in this movie, Keanu Reeves' character, he dresses like Ellen DeGeneres. So I had very low to no expectations whatsoever. I just thought it was going to be complete garbage. And to my surprise, it was actually pretty entertaining and I laughed.
No way!
Now, there is a lot of things I didn't like about the movie, and it's not really a memorable movie. I don't think this is going to go down as a classic that the originals were. Now, they've been trying to do sequels to movies that were done a long time ago. We saw this with that Indiana Jones movie, which I didn't see. I don't like the original Indiana Jones series, but people were very disappointed with that last Indiana Jones movie. And Sylvester Stallone, he's been rehashing a lot of the old characters, the Rocky characters, and I've been kind of disappointed in those, but I loved the original movie so much. I think the original Rocky movies and the original Rambo trilogy, to me, those are the best movies ever made. So, like Creed, I wasn't that into. I didn't even bother seeing the second one, and he's going to be doing more of these. And the fourth Rambo movie was a sequel like Bill and Ted, came out decades after the previous one, and that one was actually pretty decent. It wasn't as good as the original trilogy, but it was good enough to still kind of fit in and kind of be a fitting end to this character. And then flying over to America 6 months ago, I watched the newest Rambo, which I was afraid to watch, and that one was totally unnecessary and doesn't fit in enough, even though a lot of people liked it. Now Rambo just became a horror movie, and it's so far removed from the original films that it was hard for me to watch. And now Stallone wants to bring back Demolition Man and do Demolition Man 2, which they've been showing the original on AMC, American Movie Classics, a lot. And that movie was great when it came out, and it's even better now to see how much of it's come true.
No way!
But back to Bill and Ted. Personally, for me, Bill and Ted has a soft spot in my heart because the first movie that I ever saw in my life without my parents going to the theater with me was the first Bill and Ted movie. I went to this movie, my friend's mom dropped me and my friend Lauren off, and we sat there and we watched it. I liked the movie better than him, and it really resonated though with both of us because back in that era, 80s and early 90s, you had a lot of real life characters that were kind of like the guys in the movies. You had metalheads. And his older brother, Torger, this was a kid that was full-blooded Norwegian. His older brother, Torger, he was one of these metalhead guys. He had this long blonde hair. I remember he was super into Guns N' Roses, and like he was all about heavy metal music, and he was a total metalhead, like a lot of the characters that you would see in the movie. So it really resonated with both of us, but after the movie ended, I went home and I went to my parents and I was reciting the lines from the movie.
No way!
I was imitating Abraham Lincoln in the movie. I just enjoyed it so much. So then a couple years later, they came out with a sequel and I was excited, but in just a couple years' time, I was less of a little kid. I was growing up already just in that short time. So I was a little bit less enthused.
No way!
But I watched Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, and that one to me looked cheap because it's more cartoonish, trying to be surreal, and I liked it a lot less than the original, and I think most people even today they think the first Bill and Ted movie's far superior to the second, which is weird. And like I said, just kind of has this kind of cheap look. Now, a few years ago, they showed that on TV, and I watched it, and it aged quite well. And now seeing it as an adult, I think I got a few things better from it. And I enjoyed it quite a bit, Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. Not as much as the original, which still has a better look, looks like a bigger budget movie, but the second one is still a fun watch. So when they were coming out with a third Bill and Ted, I'm like, no, just stop. I don't even think I'm going to see this one. I wasn't planning on watching this movie. I thought this was going to be terrible because, for one thing, how do you take metalheads, something from such a bygone era, and try and put them in today's world when those characters don't even exist? You might remember Wayne's World. We had Bill and Ted come out, and then Wayne's World, which many people, including myself, believe is a total ripoff, came and became even more popular than Bill and Ted. Supposedly, when Mike Myers even brought up the idea to Dana Carvey about the skit that they were going to do of Wayne and Garth on Saturday Night Live, supposedly Dana Carvey said, "Aren't we just doing Bill and Ted?" And my first time seeing that, I'm like, oh, these guys are imitating Bill and Ted. But that came, and that's, for whatever reason, those movies are shown more on TV, Wayne's World, and they're better remembered than Bill and Ted for whatever reason. But as funny as Wayne and Garth are, and they're pretty funny, those movies, they have some enjoyable moments. They're funny. But to me, Bill and Ted were always head and shoulders above Wayne and Garth. But I didn't want to see this new one. I wasn't planning on seeing this. But I watched the movie. I just sat down with an open mind, watched the movie, and like when it started, they show you some clips of the old movie, and then you get into it. I'm like, well, we see when they start showing the new stuff, Bill and Ted, it turns out, they're still retarded.
No way!
But a few minutes into the movie, I started laughing, and I didn't expect that. But the good part of the movie is that Bill and Ted, they're still lovable idiots. They still provide lots of laughs and entertainment. Now, the bad part of the movie, and this is something you might expect from a movie coming out in 2020, of course, it has to diversify the movie, even at the sake of the quality of the movie. So, Bill and Ted, they're the main characters, but every other character in the movie basically is either a female. This time when they travel to the future and they're in front of the council of the leaders of the future in 2700, whenever it is, they're all female. Every prominent character in the movie is a female or a black person. This movie, it also focuses on Bill and Ted's daughters, who I think in their minds are thinking, if we can continue this franchise, we're going to pass it along to these female actresses that are playing the daughters. But they go back in time to get together a band of the world's greatest musicians from history. And of course, every one of them is black almost, except you also have a Chinese woman and you have one token white guy. It used to be the token black guy. Now you see the token white guy. You have I don't want to give away too much of the movie, but you have one Austrian guy, and he's the token white guy that has no lines because he can't speak English. Now, if you remember the original movies, I don't remember any prominent characters from the first two films being either black or female. Now, in the first one, one of the guys in the future, and they did have some black characters, but it didn't seem forced into it. It didn't seem like, hey, it's the current year, so we need to put this in the movie. It felt very natural. It wasn't jarring when you saw it. And if you remember in the first movie, when they go and they collect historical figures, they're all white. Well, one is Jewish. They're all white, and except one being Jewish, except for one character who's Asian. And it makes sense because this Asian character, he's one of the most prominent people to ever live on the planet Earth, the way he shaped the planet Earth. And even though that Asian man, like the Austrian man in the new movie, even though the Asian man didn't have any lines because he couldn't speak English, he basically just grunts, he was funny. He was hilarious in the movie. Genghis Khan, played by Al Leong, who, if you watch a lot of 80s and 90s movies, action movies, whether it's Die Hard, A-Team, the TV show, anything where you needed stuntmen, you saw this guy in the movie. So he's more associated with action movies like Die Hard. I remember in the early 90s movie Rapid Fire, he fights Brandon Lee at the end, but he's usually not the main guy in the movie. He shows up, he fights or something. He's usually a bad guy, basically a stuntman, but he was hilarious in the movie. So we have that. That's all forced in. There's one, in the new movie, there's one other prominent white male character other than Bill and Ted, and that's the Grim Reaper, who kind of steals the show, but he's not in the movie that much, which is unfortunate because the new movie, basically whenever Bill and Ted are on screen, you're going to be entertained, you're going to be laughing, but when the other characters are on the screen, like the daughters and collecting all the historical figures, I find myself waiting for the scene to be over so we can find another scene with Bill and Ted, and that's really where the movie suffers. And like I said, I think the idea is they want to carry on the franchise, but now have it be about these characters that are the daughters, which they're fine in small doses. When they first show them in the first few scenes, I'm like, okay, I like these characters. But as they kept having them more and more in the movie, I'm like, geez, I can't wait for their scenes to be over so we can go back to scenes of Bill and Ted. Now, the movie wasn't as cheap as the photos coming out, the behind the scenes photos, and the previews made it look. It wasn't near as cheap looking as that. And one thing that's very noticeable, Alex Winter, who plays Bill, he doesn't look that different from the original movies, even though we haven't really seen him over the years, because I don't even think he's an actor anymore. But Keanu Reeves definitely looks a lot different. When you see those clips of him in the old movies, he looks way older.
No way. No way.
But it really struck me as how similar Alex Winter, the character of Bill, looks to the way he looked in the previous movies. I was shocked by that. And his character is definitely the smarter one between him and Ted. Bill is maybe, he has an IQ of around 80, 85. Ted, he has an IQ maybe of around 70, and at times you think, how does this guy even manage to live on his own? Which he really doesn't. He has to live with Bill. But if this character existed, he would have to be in kind of a group home. But nonetheless, I was pleasantly surprised by this movie, but it's not going to go down as any kind of classic. It's not going to be remembered the way the first two are. And I don't think the first two are remembered enough. Like I said, they seem eclipsed by Wayne's World, which to me is an inferior imitation. It was still funny, but for whatever reason, maybe because Mike Myers has stayed more in the public eye over the years, for whatever reason, that's so much better remembered than Bill and Ted, but I'll always have a soft spot, I think, for Bill and Ted, no matter how dumb they are. But like I said, I was pleasantly surprised that this was a mediocre movie when I thought it was going to be possibly the worst movie ever made. It'll be interesting to see how this movie does, how many people see it, how much money it makes, because of course with the current world situation and things being shut down, you can't expect many people to go to the theater and see it, even though I think this has the advantage now of being the only new movie in theaters. I drove past the movie theater and it was all old movies from the 60s through about a year or two ago, and then Bill and Ted. That's the only new release they're showing. So it has that advantage, but it's also going straight to video. They expect most people to watch it in the home. So we'll see how many people actually see this and how much money it makes.